ladies and gentlemen, we've got a big deal today. Now, yesterday was April Fool's, and I didn't want to make this video yesterday because it was kind of just dropping. There was a page on NASA's website. We're going to the moon, ladies and gentlemen. So I just want to show you these four beautiful individuals are headed over to the moon, and humanity is finally going back. Now, whether you think the original moon landing was a fake or not, I don't really care. I'm just talking about what's happening now, okay? So back when humanity went to the moon back in the 70s, my dad might have been like, what, 5, 6 years old? And now I am finally alive in my 30s to at least see the actual moon landing go, or at least the sending of our people back to the moon. And it's actually pretty huge because this mission is the furthest we are apparently going, okay? So back in April 1st, 2026, literally less than 24 hours ago, we sent 4 people on a 10-day mission to fly by the moon. And yes, this makes it so that this is the furthest humanity has ever traveled, okay? Provided this mission is, God bless, an actual success. And there's a lot that can go wrong with a mission like this. One of those things has actually went wrong already, and we'll look at that really quickly. So actually, for anybody that's interested in following this, you can go to NASA's website, and you can go to the Artemis II, mission, and they do have, an actual live 3D tracker, so you can see that, again, the actual moon is right over there, and it's gonna take at least, 5 to 6 days for them to actually get over to the moon. So, I bitch about a 4-hour car drive, and here are these guys just looking at the moon, slowly getting to it. Now, of course, the big deal about this, obviously, ladies and gentlemen, is flying by, and they got a bunch of technologies over here. So, for instance, they've got things like ESC, O2O. They've got basically the ability to beam 4K footage of the moon back to us, which I think is a pretty impressive thing in of its own, meaning that we finally get higher quality footage. And I'm sure that a lot of the conspiracy theorists around will probably find new things to point out on the dark side of the moon. So, of course, obviously, what was really, really cool about this, too, was, I was looking at Reddit for, the actual, photos of people, taking the actual launch. And you can see right over here from, the Orlando Reddit, you can see that the actual, the actual, craft is flying up over here, basically leaving, okay? These guys are basically leaving the known planet to go where, well, astronauts have allegedly gone before. But of course, obviously, listen, all jokes aside, I think this is a pretty huge thing to be seeing over here. And ultimately speaking, there's going to be a further mission on top of this too. The reason why this is so important is that Artemis II is a series of 5 missions. So you can see right over here, you got Artemis 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the reason I say 5 is I'm sure that, obviously going into the future of this program, if it makes it that far, you've got a lot of big private companies like SpaceX who probably will use this as a springboard for further space travel. So the reason why this mission is so important is they're kind of doing the orbit around the moon. And then the next mission, Artemis 3, is basically to find out and basically to then land people on the actual moon. And then anything further beyond that is further exploration of something that we haven't even touched again since the early 70s. You can see over here that they've got the Artemis 3 mission, which will launch with the Orion spacecraft on top of the NASA SLS, and they'll basically test rendezvous and docking capabilities between Orion and, again, any other commercial craft like a SpaceX craft to land astronauts on the moon. And then, of course, beyond the moon is then Mars. And obviously, if we can make it that far without our species blowing each other up, then beyond Mars is the rest of our solar system. And maybe, just maybe, something beyond it. Obviously, these are pretty expensive missions. As you can imagine, the actual mission over here, the Artemis project, so far, there's not an exact cost sheet, but according to NASA, from what I've dug up, they basically found that according to everything, they're projected to spend $93 billion up to financial year 2025. Okay, so again, money on top of money is being burned. But when you compare it to the whole thing, right, when the president's asking for a $1.5 trillion budget for a dream military, I'd rather spend money on things like cancer research, schools, and of course, ultimately, the projection of space travel for a species. Because, if you really think about humanity, right, it's kind of crazy to think that a whole bunch of advancements have happened in the last 100 years, right? Like, we developed things like computers, the internet, we developed so much medical cures, we developed so many ways of logistics, we developed so many things that make human life generally better. And obviously, it's crazy to think that the amount that these developments and inventions and discoveries has accelerated, at such a scale, it almost blows your mind to think about. So again, space travel, my parents grew up with the old space race. And now, I guess, hopefully that's sort of coming back into the brink of things. Hopefully there's going to be huge things done. Obviously, I think one of the biggest challenges is knocking down the price, which I really don't think is going to happen for a while because space launches are expensive. According to this, every launch is like $4 billion. And here you can see, like, literally 59,000 people, almost 60,000 people are on NASA's website watching the live mission coverage of this. Now, where it's also really mind-blowing and crazy here is what has actually went wrong so far. Even the day of the launch, you got engineers who apparently were resolving issues with the hardware that communicates with the flight termination system that would have prevented the ground from sending a signal to destruct the rocket if it were ever to veer off course during an ascent to protect public safety, which... when you think about, like, space launches, it can be very dramatically scary. Like, there's entire situations where, obviously, the entire crew can go up in flames. But there are situations where things just align so perfectly that you get situations where people are actually headed to the moon. There's a lot that fucking goes into this. And I think, obviously, one of the funniest things about this was somehow, in some fucking way, Microsoft had a bit of an issue in this process. Yes, Microsoft also makes an appearance here. How? Let's listen to this. So this is a clip from the actual Artemis II, and listen to this. They're calling Houston for a problem.
We suspect the issue with your PCD may be Optimus software. We were able to connect to PCD1 on, we can see it on the network. So with your go, we can remote in and take a look directly.
Yeah, go for it. And then I also see that I have 2 Microsoft Outlooks, and neither one of those are working. If you want to remote in and check Optimus and those 2 Outlooks, that would be awesome.
All right, we will join in on your PCD, and we'll let you know when we're done.
Dude, they're laughing. This is the one thing they expected. Of course, they had 2 Microsoft Outlook instances, and they both seem to be fucked up in the entire process, man. So again, just leave it to probably one of the biggest fail points, at least hilariously so, being the Microsoft email system that they had right over here. Now, obviously, the reason why the Microsoft Outlook stuff is kind of important is because we're going so far into the moon, there is actually a test on, I believe, a new compartment for the radiation on the actual shuttle. So again, while you have specialized software obviously on board, like they're going to write special software for stuff they do complement that with off-the-shelf software, which includes basically anything from any publicly commercial available software. So it could be an iPhone, it could be a fucking Outlook, it could be basically anything. And of course, obviously, while Outlook is just a compliment, you can see even in their voice, you can hear that they weren't exactly freaking out about this. If they really needed to communicate or track things, they would have proprietary solutions. Outlook just serves as a fun little goofy thing we all can kind of laugh at because it's Microsoft having some issues. I don't even think it's them entirely to blame too. You'd have to understand how this piece of how this piece of aerospace engineering even works to begin with. But all things aside, I think one of the coolest technologies they kind of have is something known as O2O, which is a payload that they're using for literally laser communications, right? And again, I don't really know much of the history of how NASA's been doing this, but I always found it really awesome and cool that, back in the days when we sent our people out to the moon, we were able to send, I believe it was live transmission of it back. And, back during Apollo 11, when we used, again, microwave signals to send information back and forth, now we're moving up to the era of 4K, and we're using these straight-up laser communication demonstrations to send information back. And again, ultimately, what's also important about this, too, is, if humanity ever does make it to the moon as a colony, or makes it to, Mars, for instance, then this kind of technology is going to be really important to connect us together, right? It's going to allow our internets to talk to each other, as opposed to 2 people living in 2 separate parts of the, galaxy, not connected. That wouldn't just make any sense, right? Somebody made a pretty decent tracker for this, like they vibe coded it together where they were just showing basically the actual schedule for what the crew is going to be doing over here. And, you know, one thing that I have to say is being inside a shuttle going to the moon, it must be probably one of the scariest things to be these people and sort of like basically like the next like 8 days for these individuals, the next like 8 days for them is going to be like so fucking scary because obviously it's getting to the moon, it's doing the full loop around, and it's coming back alive, which I think is probably on the mind of every single person on board here. Obviously, even people at mission control, right? Like this is one of the most stressful periods for these people. It's amazing to look at, you know, in humanity land from down below where I'm sitting, but when you're up there and you're in mission control, there's got to be pits in people's stomachs. And obviously, look, I love the UFO community too. Literally 20 hours ago, you saw that the community was showcasing like UFOs flying allegedly behind the launch. So you can see like right around here at some point in this video, you see that little like blurb go around. There was like a little UFO, allegedly, of course. So obviously, look, I think somebody said it's going to be a long week on the subreddit simply because we're going to get a lot of people who are going to be like, what are these structures on the dark side of the moon? And I think when we get 4K footage and a lot of people's conspiracy theories might get disproved, it's going to be fun to see. But it's interesting, and the reason why I wanted to wait like a day or something is because they finally were able to send back some cool little images of what Earth looked like literally today as we're speaking. Like one of the shots that I saw of Artemis II, and I really hope none of this is artificial intelligence. Please, God, nothing. Like this is apparently a shot of like, you know, for what NASA released. So again, you can see the Earth over there, the Artemis II shuttle. This is like by far one of the most beautiful things. You can see the curvature of the Earth. So again, not flat. But I'll never be able to convince people that are totally flatists. But you get the point right here. It is beautiful to see. It's the kind of stuff that you literally can only see in games like No Man's Sky. Actually, more accurately, Star Citizen. As much as that game has burned me, it's crazy, but like, the only way that I get to vicariously experience space stuff is through shit like this, which is why these NASA projects are super exciting. And again, I feel like we live in a world right now where things are so fucking negative. You know, there's war, there's rising prices, shit is bad. But in some ways, at least stuff like this happens for the next 8 days that sort of diverts my attention, keeps me focused on something that is, in my opinion, a pretty big positive for humanity. I think, you know, it's interesting to see the next stage. You know, what is that saying? It's like you're too old to explore the seas, too young to see the stars, right? I think for a lot of people, it's like, you know, when you had people leaving from like Europe all the way to come to the New World at the time, which is, you know, Canada, the United States, Mexico, the whole North, South America. You know, it's interesting that, you know, that was like going to space for those people at the time. This it feels like that, except obviously on a much grander fucking scale, you know, to go up to the heavens. So, I don't know, maybe in my lifetime, by the time I'm like 60, 70, maybe a few years after I'm dead, I don't know. I really hope that humanity can some point colonize the moon, colonize Mars, maybe make another step onto a planet. But I think before we get to that stage, we all have to start working together better than we are right now. And I don't know if that's possible, but a man can obviously dream. And I think that's a pretty important part about this too. It's like a lot of people are talking about the really negative shit these days, but at least there's something cool happening. So I do want to make it a point on my channel that, you know, even though we cover a lot of sad stuff recently, at least cool stuff like this happens where we're going to the fucking moon again, ladies and gentlemen. We haven't been to the moon in decades. So we're going to go again. Hopefully we're going to set foot one more time. And hopefully there will be some cool new shit that comes out that we all can look at. Ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. I am out.